Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Good to Know, our podcast series on food safety and sanitation. Today's topic is specifically on food policy and the impact on the growing phase. So, Darin, welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back again and to impart some of my knowledge and my classroom research and teachings on the broader pictures of food policy and food safety.
And Aaron, you took a recent trip to our friends in Washington, D.C. to talk a little bit about policy or learn a little bit about what's going on now and hopefully have some influence on what the change could be, specifically to the innovative form of growing, which you're an expert on. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to Washington, D.C.?
Absolutely. I was definitely listening and learning more than I was speaking and teaching, I think, for the most part. But it was an eye-opening experience, something I hope to build upon with not only the uh, lawmakers and some of the agencies we met with, like the FDA and the USDA, but also with the people that went. It's one of the first good conglomerations of companies in the industry coming together to kind of speak our mind. And it's been growing vigorously over the past year and a half. So going there and talking to connecting the dots for someone like the USDA and the FDA on not really even talking food policy as much as you're like, what are you really doing to bring food to us? What are you really using? What does this look like for you? What's the difference between this and that? And do you really use this? Like, there's so many intricate questions. It's like they'd never been there before. And that was a very good experience knowing that we were providing our experiences, what we've learned, and how to really do this well to provide safe and nutritious food to everyone and still work within rigors that everyone can agree on and rules that keep us as a safe, productive industry.
Talking about keeping your ears open, I have to admit, about 9 or 10 years ago, I was traveling around the country with the FDA leadership when they were putting together
Mm.
the rules for FSMA. And some of the things I heard and ended up finding out how FDA leadership responded to them, they were having to redefine the word farm and commodity.
Mhm.
And now, we were just over at the Indoor Ag Con, and I was sharing this, and some folks are pointing out how if you look at a lot of the current laws, they don't actually address controlled environment agriculture or indoor ag or hydroponic, aquaponic, all the different kind of words. So it's like, you want to find yourself represented in the very laws and regulatory compliance elements you're supposed to follow and be in compliance with. But we have innovation that moves at one speed, and sometimes policy works at either a slower speed or sometimes I'm not kidding. Sometimes it seems as if policy makers work in an opposite direction of innovation when it comes to how we are growing various produce today.
That's great. Great point. Darren, I can speak to when I did my very first FISMA training in 2015 or 14, something like that. It was right after everything, and I did my first food safety audits after that in my greenhouses, and they were asking about, how far were we from, the cattle barn, and how close were you to the feed mill? And I was like, what? I'm in the middle of Brooklyn. Like, I don't have any of this stuff. And so you were constantly NAing all this giant document and module because it didn't apply whatsoever, but that's how it was written before. And they were working
Yeah.
through this transition to understanding an industry that no one understood. And then you fast forward to this past January, I'm sitting in the USDA office listening to their leaders talk about this great data they have. And to your point about speed, like they had some really, really good data. And like a third of it was based off of some companies that either weren't around or had dramatically changed since they collected that data. And the industry doesn't even exist as their data represents anymore. So they're not even close to keeping up with the speed of an innovating new industry, at least in the respects of this high tech greenhouse work.
Well, and it's tough too when you realize that you have 15 different federal agencies that play some role in whether it's the communicable disease or public health side or the FDA, the USDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the water.
Mm,
And on top of that, you have all the different policies at state levels. Some states allow this, some
Hmm.
states don't allow that. Some states are using models that are, within the last 5 years. Some states are using models that are 30 years old. Some states are funded one way, some states are funded another way. And now we're finding, some concerns in terms of there's states that are making and introducing and even passing laws that are banning certain things that you got to start to
Hmm.
wonder, why are they doing this? Florida just introduced and signed into law a law that banned the manufacture, production, distribution, and sale of cell cultured meats. Alabama is poised to do the same. And I know one might be saying, okay, what does cell or lab grown meats have to do with controlled environmental agriculture? But if you kind of look at the idea of, it's not too much of a degree of separation here. Once you start talking about cell grown meats, you could be talking about plant based meats. You could be talking about other newer forms of growing foods. And now, how long down the road is it possible that someone starts bringing up the idea of controlled environment agriculture or indoor agriculture in the same light? And I bring this up because this was not based on any kind of scientific factor data. The argument was that this would disrupt the more traditional companies, the more traditional entities in terms of meat. And that reasoning I could see being applied to more modern, innovative ways of growing produce as well. And I know you and I have talked briefly on this. What are your thoughts? Because I have to admit, my
Hmm.
first thought when I saw this about Florida and Alabama, my first thought was about your plant there, your operation in Texas.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a good connection. It's a slippery slope when you start writing legislation to preserve a way that you don't know is better, that may have been proven to be worse, just because you don't understand a new alternative, a new innovation. And I think that's a poor way to do decision making. I actually work for a company that's trying to disrupt the food miles, the food safety vacuum, the loss in nutrition, the availability of safe food to people, and nutritious food and fresh food, and the value it brings to consumers across the country. I'm trying to disrupt that entire thing. And I have to tell people, do you have any idea where your lettuce comes from? Do you have any idea where your herbs come from? Do you understand that at all? Before you shoot down the way that I grow things for whatever reasons you may be informed or not informed or bad, you need to understand what I'm really trying to replace. And in the notion of this cell cultured meat in that industry, like, it's pretty well documented how dirty, the meat processing industry can be for the environment and for a lot of other things. Not to say that we don't need that and there's not good ways to do that, but you definitely need to continue to be innovating in a world that cannot produce enough food for itself, specifically in the United States, and be safe and be healthy. When you can remove variables like we do in a greenhouse that can be risks, where we can mitigate risks better, like you can in a lab environment or a safe production environment, I think we should be welcoming those things and definitely not be shooting them down immediately.
Well, I have four ideas in terms of going forward, and I'd like to hear
Hmm,
your thoughts on all four of these. Are
like
you
this.
ready?
Good.
Number
Absolutely.
one,
Fire away.
number one is awareness. There has to be awareness. You
Mm,
were talking about what you're doing in DC when we talk with other
hmm.
stakeholders, like at the Indoor AgCon and beyond. There has to be an awareness of the whether it's a SWOT analysis or just the value add or just what are the positives. What can controlled environment agriculture now create as a positive to benefit the environment, to benefit the consumer? That's got to be step one. And I'm sure that you're running into that idea of people that don't really understand, like you're saying, they don't really understand what the value is of your product.
Yeah, I know that for a fact. One of my favorite things to do, it's creepy as it may sound, is hang out in the produce section of the grocery store and really watch people buy their produce. And I ask the workers and the people, they're like, "Why did you pick that one?" And most of the time people are uncomfortable, but they're very happy to talk about like, "Oh, I didn't even know which one I picked." Or you ask somebody, "What brand did you just put in your cart?" And they have no idea. And why was it that one? It's almost always price, and it's almost always aesthetic, right? They're not
Does
concerned
lettuce
about
have a
what's.
brand? Like, there's a brand for lettuce?
Well,
I mean,
yeah, well,
you're
well, exactly. That's exactly right. Like, no, you go ask somebody what brand lettuce they bought last, and they have no idea, right? And ask people when the last time you had bad tasting lettuce. Most people aren't going to say anything. It's the second thought. What you're searching for is something that looks good and something that's safe for you. Specifically, when it comes to lettuce, when you have the every year it's a romaine outbreak of listeria or some such thing, and so they begin to not trust, and so you look for some type of sign or symbol or whatever that says this is better for you, but then all of a sudden you're a little untrustworthy when you see that sign. Well, how do I know, right? We love to be skeptical on that stuff, but that education has to come from people like us, from people in the industry, from people that understand, and then it has to trickle down into your family, your friends, your coworkers as a company. But and it grows into this grassroots movement of what are you really purchasing here? You're purchasing a leaf that is a vessel for most of your food that adds texture and color, and you really want it just to be safe. You want to know that you can feed something to your family and it's not going to be harmful. And that is all about awareness, and it has to be spoken loudly and clearly with passion, but not with anything incendiary. You can't start saying that field grown is bad or I don't like stuff in soil. That's not what we're doing here. You're talking about an evolution, you're talking about an improvement and an innovation. You're not talking about destroying something that got you here.
Well, and what you described is literally hitting my points 2 and 3. Um, with a growing network, if you will, of people that are helping bring about this awareness, now you have allies who are helping communicate and improve this message, and from those allies, you hope for you hope that you end up bringing about advocacy, the idea of people clearly, and not it's advocate like you said, advocacy is not tearing down the other people. Advocacy is supporting the values of it, specifically this type of a product. And the fourth point I'll bring up is that not all advocates become activists. People kind of confuse the two. Just because you're an advocate for something does not mean that you're the going on a march carrying a big sign and causing
Right.
disruption and
Right.
things of that nature. There may be some people like that, but advocates are there to not only advocate for, in this case, the controlled environment agriculture and the type of leafy greens we're talking about here, but also to advocate for the consumers. Why is this in the consumer's best interest? If we advocate for the consumer's best interest, then it's almost like a problem that finds a solution as opposed to a solution that we're trying to force down people's throat, even though they don't realize they have a problem.
Could not agree more. Yeah, I'm starting to learn that difference between advocacy and maybe revolutionizing or something like that, something a little more incendiary. I'm not that person. I do not want to burn bridges and destroy things and reinvent. What I want to do is improve and create and innovate and educate. Educate is such a big deal. So many places have no idea that you're even doing this indoors. Or where does your food come from? Or did we import food last year? We sure did. Did anybody know that? You live in some of the most fertile soil and wonderful climate in the world in the United States, and you're buying food from someplace else. Like what? And that adds a whole nother risk. Like just little things like that that get you thinking, right? Planting an idea can be the most incendiary part of a thought process, right? I keep saying incendiary, sorry. That's my word of the day. But that genesis of that thought process is really what gets people moving in a new direction and start considering things. But it takes a voice one way or another.
Well, and it's hard to find those voices, especially we've shifted from a society that literally would go out into their own field on their own property and pick their produce for dinner or for the week or whatever kind of a deal. Maybe
Hmm.
bartering with their
Hmm.
neighbors. Maybe that sounds like it's so far long ago, like Little House on the Prairie long ago, kind of a thing. But it wasn't
Right.
that long ago. Even in our
No.
lifetimes, everyone here, um, when we were kids,
Right.
there was more of a likelihood that we ate food that came from our county and our state than there is today. And
Yes.
as much as we keep getting
100%.
farther and farther from the source, we just it's not even that we are asking questions. Unfortunately, it's that we're not asking these questions. Where does this come from? How is it grown? And how is this beneficial to me or not? So I think we need to have this course. With the discourse, we can have the awareness and even build allies. And from those allies, gain those advocates that'll say, hey, maybe there's a problem with passing a law that would prevent this from uh, being a way in which we grow food. And if more states pass these laws and take away consumers' choice and take away the drive for innovation, what is that going to do in terms of the long-term outlook for food sustainability, not just food safety?
I couldn't agree more. Um, I think that you're still hitting that education point, that changes that's been so subtle, maybe the scariest part, right? The fact that I probably question more than most, but when we were kids, I could tell you a dozen items that I ate out of the garden or that we canned or that I got from my grandparents' garden and we canned, like that type of thing, which is fantastic. But we stopped even questioning why we don't do that, or that it was so subtle and so quiet. And then all of a sudden, all your tomatoes are coming from Canada or Mexico. And people don't trust hydroponics because it doesn't taste the same. Or what does greenhouse grown really mean? And I don't trust that because they have to spray with a bunch of stuff. And no one really has any full idea except people that are doing it themselves. So maybe it's just that we don't question enough, also.
Yeah, very, very much could be. Very much could be.
Good.
Guys, as we finish up here with the focus on food policy and food regulation, I don't think any of us are speaking against policy regulation, helping understand the direction that we need to go forward. But what we're asking is that whatever policy is put in place, whatever regulation is put in place, that we're also keeping an eye on innovation, allowing us to grow as a vertical industry, right? And not just stay with the way that we've always done it is the way we're going to do it moving forward. So I want to thank you both for being a part of the discussion today. Dr. Darin Detwiler, you can learn more about the Herculean effort that he's undertaking with food safety and his contact information on the screen below. And also would like to thank Aaron Fields of Eden Green Technologies. Thank you again for all of the valuable expertise that you all brought to the conversation today. And to learn more about PathoSans, please take a moment to visit the website that's listed on the screen below. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, my contact information is there as well. And again, thank you for joining today's conversation about food policy and regulation, another subject that we thought would be good to know.